Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be going over 8 wide receivers that are absolutely skyrocketing up my rankings for the rest of the fantasy football season. Now, of course, at the end, if you do enjoy, please consider dropping a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel if you are new. All right, guys, first up on this list is DK Metcalf. Listen to the stat line against the Las Vegas Raiders here. 11 catches, 90 yards, 15 targets. That's going to equal 20.0 PPR fantasy points. 15 targets is an insane share for DK Metcalf, especially when you got players like Tyler Lockett on the same team. Kenneth Walker, that's going to be taking away some targets. Absolutely unbelievable. This offense looks great. Even though they're not winning every single game they're playing, they're putting up consistent points. And that's all we really care about at the end of the day in fantasy football. So I like these guys to keep producing, keep being consistent for the rest of the season. DK Metcalf is a solid player. You should be happy if you have him going forward. Coming in at number 2 is a guy that we ranked very high in our wide receiver rankings for week 12. Got a little backlash on it, but I'm glad we did it because he absolutely went crazy against the Buffalo Bills. AMON-RA St. Brown. 9 catches, 122 yards last week against the Bills on Thanksgiving. 1 touchdown, 27.9 fantasy points for this guy. He is the clear number 1, at least until Jameson Williams comes back on this team, and I don't expect him to be taking that role over from AMON-RA this season, to be totally honest with you. I'm very confident in AMON-RA going forward as the number 1. Got some favorable matchups against the Jags and the Minnesota Vikings coming up. And then in your fantasy playoffs, Carolina Panthers and the Chicago Bears, along with the New York Jets, which you don't love that matchup. But geez, AMON-RA, how can you not like what you're seeing? If you bought low on this guy a couple weeks ago, you are reaping the rewards right now, and you are feeling like an absolute king. I love it. AMON-RA, keep doing your thing, baby. Coming up next, we have Chris Godwin. And last week's stats for Godwin: 12 catches, 110 yards, 1 touchdown on 13 targets. That's going to equal 29.0 PPR fantasy points. Chris Godwin has been nothing but consistent for you all year long, and I have to keep raising him up and up my fantasy rankings because he's performing so well. Since week 1, he hasn't been under 10 points, which you love to see. He's Tom Brady's safety blanket. He's getting the targets that he should get and that Mike Evans should be getting. Mike Evans, don't even get me started on that guy. Just has been such a disappointment this year. And Chris Godwin's making up for it on this team. If you have Chris Godwin, you're getting the production of Mike Evans and him combined right now. You're loving it. You're reaping the rewards. I'm very confident going into the rest of the season, because if you're going to have a high floor with Godwin like you do, because he gets so many targets, how can you really go wrong? Do not be benching Chris Godwin going into the rest of the year. I'm telling you right now, because he will have games like this and you're just going to be kicking yourself for it. You don't want that to happen. Next up here, we have Christian Watson, who, listen, I was very skeptical. I'm still very skeptical about his target share. The past 2 games, he's got 6 targets, but the past 2 games, he's also gotten 21.0 and 21.1 PPR fantasy points. I mean, if he's going to be this efficient every single week, I don't think we can sit Christian Watson. He's getting more targets than Allen Lazard. He's getting more catches than Allen Lazard. He's scoring more points than Allen Lazard. And this is really what I was monitoring over this next couple of weeks and maybe into the Chicago game when they play him next. Is he the new number 1 receiver in Green Bay? It certainly looks like it. So he's definitely raising up my rankings, and he will be ranked higher in this next week. I guarantee you that. Next up, we have TREYLON Burks on the Tennessee Titans. Another guy, another young player that seems to be the rising star, the rising stud of this roster, this organization right now, and emerging to be the number 1 receiver for the Titans here. The past couple of weeks, I mean, this week against Cincinnati here, 4 catches for 70 yards, but he was the clear leader in receiving yards here. 17.0 PPR fantasy points. He did fall on top of a fumble that was in the end zone, so that's going to pad on some extra points. But hey, no one's complaining about that, baby. No one is complaining about that. He has some favorable matchups coming up as well, and I like his chemistry with Ryan Tannehill right now. If Malik Willis were to start again, I would definitely drop him down my rankings, but as long as Ryan Tannehill is back there at quarterback, seems to be pretty efficient. He seems to be pretty efficient. Up next, we have the Philadelphia Eagles, who are giving up a lot of yards through the air. And I'm pretty confident he's going to have another good game here against the Eagles defense and possibly for the rest of the season. So he is definitely trending in the right direction. Next up, we have Garrett Wilson, and Mike White showed Garrett Wilson's true potential here. 5 catches, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns, 26.4 fantasy points for Garrett Wilson owners. You gotta love what you're seeing right here. I know a lot of people probably benched him in this matchup, I can't lie, but as long as Mike White is the quarterback and it's not Zach Wilson, because Zach Wilson just seems to have a bad chemistry with everybody on this team. As sad as that sounds, I wish that weren't the case at all, but I mean, that seems to be true. Garrett Wilson has shown glimpses of greatness this year. I mean, there's certain games where he drops 30 points, then he's dropping 17.5, 17.9 in PPR. Then he drops duds every now and again. And I don't want to blame the quarterback for that, but we might have to be blaming the quarterback for that because this guy seems to be very, very talented. As long as Mike White is back there, he has some favorable matchups coming up against a Minnesota defense that gives up a lot of points, Buffalo defense that gives up a lot of points, and then in the playoffs, the Jags and Seattle that also give up a lot of points. Pretty favorable schedule going forward. He's definitely rising up my rankings as long as Mike White stays at quarterback. Mike White looked great. Looking great, Mike White. Keep up the good work, baby. Next up, we have Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen is basically just sliding into the spot that he left when he got injured this year. I mean, come on. He's dropping 5 catches, 49 yards, 1 touchdown, 15.9 fantasy points this week. Last week, he had 12.4 fantasy points. I would expect a very consistent stream, like 10 to 15 fantasy points from Keenan Allen every single week that you play him. He's that low end wide receiver too, I believe. He's a little bit older, so he doesn't have that, you know, breakaway ability, huge, massive play ability, but he is still a very good receiver, definitely rising up my list. I wanted to see how he performed, you know, a couple games after coming back for that injury. He seems to be fully recovered. He seems to be doing well again, which is great to see. That's going to help out Herbert. Now all we need in this offense is Mike Williams back, and we can actually see the complete package. But as of right now, Keenan Allen owners start him every single week. He's going to drop consistent points for you. Next up is Marquise Brown, and this is going to be the last guy on the list. Similar situation. I really wanted to see how he played in his first game back, so I was telling a lot of people, you know, I wouldn't be 100% confident starting Marquise Brown this week, but dropping 10.6 PPR fantasy points in the first game back from an injury, especially when you have a player like DeAndre Hopkins on the other side of the field, you know, competing for targets with you, and you got James Conner in the backfield competing for targets. This was still a solid game. He's going up against some really tough defenses coming up here, so I'm going to be extremely excited to see how he does in these games, but he did great in the beginning of the year. I think you have to put him in lineups here going forward, and I would be pretty confident in it, so he's definitely rising up my rankings. If you guys learned anything from this video, make sure to drop a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you are new. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.